So you think sketching faces or creating playful characters can be hard? Well, by the end of this video, you might just shock yourself with how easy it can be and how much fun you can have creating simple little caricatures and faces just like this, all using a little bit of watercolor magic and a simple step-by-step process. So let's start doodling some faces. The first thing you do is grab a brush, and I'm using a little flat brush, but equally you could use a round brush. It absolutely doesn't matter. And all we're going to do is create some marks on the page. You want to make varied marks. You want them nice and watery, because with these watery marks you're going to get interesting textures. So we've got these sort of shapes emerging here, circles and squares. But within that, because we're using watery watercolors, there's going to be little extra shapes inside. For example, you can see the sort of circle, the blue circle at the top of the page. Already that's got a darker sort of hemisphere at the bottom of it. The pink at the bottom of the page as well, that's got a couple of darker areas on the right and the left compared to the center. So just make some quick marks, add a couple of colors into each mark if you like, but keep it simple. Don't overthink this. I'm not trying to create anything in particular. The joy about this process is how just loosely creative it is. The expression will come when we look back at these when they're dried in just a few moments and start to find shapes. And just like that, they are dry. So now I'm grabbing my fine pen. This is a fountain pen, but you could equally use a fine liner. My fountain pen here has an ultra extra fine nib. It's a bit like a 0.2mm fine liner, to give you an idea of what you might want to use if you don't have a really fine fountain pen. To start with, we're just finding simple shapes, and there's obvious shapes. There's the outline of the scene, and from that outline you might find here like a nose. When you've got the nose, you know where you might want to look for the eyes and the ear, and perhaps add maybe a pair of glasses here. Some of these shapes will already be forming obvious things. For example, this yellow-orange shape has got that funny texture at the top, which makes a perfect hairdo. So we've got this funny caricaturish face just emerging from nothing really. Sometimes we might look at the shape and it's basically turned into a square, hasn't it? Well, the face we're making can be brought on from below that instead of as part of that. So here we just turn that big square into a top hat, and we can draw a really simple shape underneath. Now this face isn't going to look amazing when we draw it first time, and equally the orange face doesn't look amazing yet either. But this is the first step of the process, and in art we always just have to trust the process. So remember the thumbnail you clicked on, remember what I showed you at the beginning. That's what we're heading towards, and this is the start. And equally, when you start yours, I imagine you might lose a bit of confidence, but remember, this is the first step of the process. So there is a few more minutes of art to go before we have created our impactful, really fun, really interesting faces. The other thing is, you don't have to find necessarily a face at all, or certainly not a human face. This is, well, as I'm drawing it, I'm intending it to be a dog, but maybe it's a pig, maybe it's a dog, maybe it's a bulldog, maybe it's something else. We get the idea, though, of a face. We get the idea of something alive. So now I'm just going to continue moving around my different splashes with these same ideas. Things you might want to experiment with are using slightly larger dark areas like the eye and the nose here, or adding more obvious accessories. This chap, for example, has glasses. You might want to leave the faces more simple, or give them a big collar, even give them some funky little hair, a little comb over, things like that. Maybe your splashes can be split into two people. So here we've got two people sort of squished together. One of them's got a sort of funny hat on the right, and the other's bald. Really simple ideas. So just explore these simple splashes and keep moving around, and just be a bit flexible, a bit light. Here I lost my initial thought. I wasn't sure what was going on, but we will see that actually when we add our next step, that very loose face comes together. This last one's kind of a circle, but with that circle again we can add a couple of little marks and have someone facing away from us. And now we move on to our next step. We're grabbing a bolder pen. Now this could be a bolder fine liner. Here I'm using a Fude pen or a sort of felt pen, or I could just use the same fountain pen and press a little bit harder. Even using the same fine liner would work if we just went over our lines a couple of times. All I'm doing here now is reinvigorating or reinvesting or restating the lines which I felt worked, the important ideas. So, I felt confident in that chap on the top right. We could immediately go around him and look, he sort of jumps off the page. Here we've got our man with our sort of funky hairdo formed by that texture in the watercolour. And I equally feel pretty confident with him, so I can just go around, add a couple of little extra marks to suggest some skin creases or texture or whatever we want to consider them. The dog or the pig here, it doesn't really matter what it is. It feels like an animal and it can be abstract and it can be a bit of fun. And again, which bits have worked? And we just go around them and boldly add lines to them. The beanie man facing away. Now we can start playing with a bit of contrast. I mentioned, the idea of using larger areas of dark to make something seem more impactful. And here's a great example of that by sort of finding the headband or the band part of his beanie hat, blacking it in. It becomes really evident that there's a different texture, a different thing going on. Again, just moving around, exploring different ideas, using different bits of boldness, of darkness, blacking in different areas, using bold lines in some places, and other places just leaving those fountain pen lines alone, leaving them nice and fine. Here's the one where I lost my way a little bit. And now with a bit more confidence, we can come back with that bold pen and we can find a woman with a sort of longer hairdo. And here are two people which are a little bit difficult to make out with those fine lines. Again, with a bit more confidence, having had a bit of time to think through what's going on, can really easily make them into significantly more impactful people, just like that. You might have noticed I avoided talking about this man on the bottom right. And that's because, again, I felt hadn't really worked. But having done all the others, I'm able to come back and find a couple more shapes which are out with the paint. And actually, I feel by adding those in, it made things work. And now I can move on to the final step, which is a tiny bit more paint. The idea here is that watercolours are designed to be used in layers. Now we don't need to, with simple illustrations, do loads of layering, but here we can add a couple of touches of extra paint. And do you see how that is significantly darker? And that extra darkness gives us value, which it gives us shadow. When you have shadow, you have something which is a 3D shape. Hatching with our ink does a similar idea. But I think most of us can agree that hatching is a brilliant technique to use, whilst colour has an extra dimension to it. So it can provide not just texture and not just value or shadow, but these simple tiny touches of colour, applying a bit of shadow, a bit of extra saturation, a bit of punch, and just a heap of extra fun. You can see applying this yellow on our bald man with a comb over kind of just makes him jump off the page a little bit more. And really, these kind of small, tiny, fun little touches are what art should be all about. For most of us, at least, we're just here trying to have a bit of fun. And there you go. Join in, have a bit of fun, doodle some faces, and I'll see you in the next video. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really, really happy. Thanks again.